I understood the sentiment and, seemed to be a pretty positive reaction to the hire. Friday, news comes out that he is not going to be South Carolina's wide receivers coach, instead going to take the same job at Georgia. For those that are not familiar, Brian McClendon, a former South Carolina assistant himself, had been the wide receivers coach at Georgia and just took the same position with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just a couple weeks back. So, of course, that means Kirby Smart and company were on the lookout for who could come in and take that position, and they chose James Coley. And people will ask the question, I even got people were tweeting at me over the weekend asking, well, why would James Coley do this? And I think it's pretty simple. It's a better opportunity. That is a program that is obviously at the top level of college football right now, just coming off of winning 2 out of the past 3 national championships, has an already loaded wide receiver room, and it's a place that James Coley's familiar with. Now, we don't know the details of his new contract at Georgia, but I imagine it's probably more than the $750,000 that he was going to be paid annually here at South Carolina. And, again, Coley doesn't have any reason to be loyal to the South Carolina football program. Yes, he and Shane had a prior relationship during their time coaching at Georgia, so there is that connection there. But if another program comes at you with a bag of money that is better than what you're getting at your current place, and there, again, is just a better overall sentiment around that program right now, why wouldn't you take it? If you're working at a job and somebody from another company and more highly revered company says, hey, you want to come work for us? Here's, $100,000 more than what you're being paid at your current job, then yeah, you're going to jump and do that. So it makes sense. And I can also understand why those within the fan base feel a little bit betrayed, because it's, kind of being blindsided. Now, we're, in late February here. March is at the end of this week. Typically, we're not still talking about assistant coaches being shuffled around at this point in time during the offseason. Usually that stuff, hey, January, all right, everybody's season's ending and guys are getting let go and guys are moving here and guys are moving there. Typically, by this point in the calendar, we know who the coaches are going to be, who the assistants are going to be, the whole 9 yards, and can be ready to go for spring practice here in a little over just a couple weeks time. Actually, it's going to be late March. Instead, you are now trying to fill another position in late February. And the unfortunate part, as you get deeper and deeper into the offseason, is less and less options available, unless you want to do what seemingly Georgia did here. And again, we don't have the contract numbers just yet because Georgia still has to officially introduce him, have the board of directors meetings and all that kind of stuff to approve the contract. So we don't know what that number is going to be. But again, I assume it's going to be more. So can South Carolina do that to somebody? Can South Carolina say, hey, we want your wide receivers coach. We're going to offer him $50,000 or $100,000 more than he's making at whatever school and bring him in here? I don't know. But I do know it's less than advantageous situation to still be looking for a position coach this late in the going. Are they going to find somebody? Who that is, I don't know. Is it a young person? Is it an older coach that's been around the game for a long time? Who knows? But they'll find somebody, and we'll have them hopefully here by spring practice, and everything will be fine past them. But it is, again, news that took a lot of people by surprise over the weekend, rightfully so, because this is just, added to the laundry list of a lot of movement when it comes to assistant coaches and coordinators in just over the past month alone. And GamecockCentral.com has a really good detailed breakdown of, dates for everything that's happened. So January 3rd, turn of the year. It's when you let go of Montario Hardesty. Something that didn't surprise a lot of people. The running back position had been struggling in the 3 years under Beamer, where Montario Hardesty was in charge of that spot. So, okay. A week later, Jody Wright leaves to go to Murray State. So it opens up your tight end coach spot, which, again, is where you slide Justin Stepp over and bring in James Coley to be the wide receivers coach. A week after that, you have Marquell Blackwell getting hired on as the runnings backs coach. And then a couple days later, Pete Limbo leaves to go take the head coaching position of Buffalo, to where soon after you bring in Joe DeCamillis to replace him as special teams coordinator. And then about a week after that, Justin Stepp leaves to go be the wide receivers coach at Illinois. Justin Stepp, a wide receiver by trade, a position that he played, a position that he's coached all the way up to this point in his coaching career, clearly a spot that he wants to coach. Not that he didn't want to be a tight ends coach, but saw an opportunity to continue being a wide receivers coach at Illinois and took that. And obviously, just about 10 days ago, you hire Sean Elliott, who was a head coach at Georgia State, as your new run game coordinator and tight ends coach as well. Again, all that happening. And then James Coley on Friday or Saturday over the weekend, moving on to be the wide receivers coach at Georgia. So again, all that happening in a little over a month's time. That's a lot. There's a lot of coaching staffs that don't have that much shifting and changing over the course of 2 seasons, let alone what happened in just over a month's time here at South Carolina. So what is Georgia getting out of this? Obviously, they're getting somebody that is familiar with the program, was there under Kirby Smart for several seasons, ended up calling plays in 2019. Now, that didn't end up working out too well, but he was still a solid position coach at the end of the day, which is what he's being asked to do in this scenario. We talk about, and this is what was hyped up about him when Shane brought him in a month ago, was his recruiting prowess, particularly in South Florida, where, if you know anything about recruiting, the Miami area is rich with 4- and 5-star talent on a year in, year out basis. And James Coley had done a really good job pulling a lot of those guys out of that area and other areas around the country as well, not just there. Very good recruiter. Somebody that helped Kirby Smart put together a lot of good recruiting classes in his time at Georgia, and the hope and anticipation was that he was going to be able to do the same thing here at South Carolina, and unfortunately that's obviously not going to end up being the case now. So, and I know a lot of people have kind of watched what's happened with Georgia and their assistants as of late, where again I mentioned Brian McClendon moving on to being the wide receivers coach at Tampa Bay. Fran Brown went to go be the head coach at Syracuse. Del McGee just took Sean Elliott's head coaching job at Georgia State. And a lot of people look at that, so, Georgia losing its foundation, losing its base. It's getting weaker. Well, no, that's not how this works. As we saw with Alabama for so many years, you lose assistants, guess what? You just bring in new ones. And sometimes that means you end up poaching them from other schools that have already hired that person just a couple weeks before. So Georgia's not going anywhere. And, in their mind, James Coley gives them the best opportunity as far as their wide receivers coach. So they went out and hired him. And again, we'll see how that pans out and see what Shane Beamer does now, that he's got to go back to the drawing board. And again, it's less than advantageous to be looking for a position coach 3-4 weeks before spring practice starts, but that is the reality of college football now. And we will certainly see how Beamer chooses to fill that void. And again, you got to be pretty quick with it at the end of the day. And Wes and Chris will jump in here with me in the 11 o'clock hour, and we'll see what they think as far as any, potential replacements that could be on the table at, at this point in time. But it is certainly something that is going to need to be filled relatively quickly. I want your thoughts. How do you feel about this? Do you feel betrayed? Do you feel, numb? Is it just part of college football that you're, used to at this point in time? What are your thoughts? Let me know on the Firehouse Subs text line, 803-404-6100. I'll get to some of those thoughts as the show goes along, because a lot of people fired up about it, and rightfully so. And you're entitled to feel how you want to feel, but I'm genuinely curious on what those exact feelings are. We'll continue this conversation not only as the morning goes along, but as the day goes along as well. Coming up, though, we're diving into some basketball. Men's team in action on Saturday, picking up a very, very significant win on the road in Oxford. We'll dive into that as well as what Coach Paris had to say coming away from that. Real quick, I want to remind you, though, no matter where you are, you can always listen to the game, whether that be on traditional radio in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. You can listen to us on the 107.5 The Game app. Just literally download the 107.5 The Game app and take us with you wherever you go, around the state, around the country, around the world, or newest option, you can watch us on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends at Shepherd's Glass on YouTube.com. Plenty of ways to take in the game, again, no matter where you are. Men's basketball picking up victory in Oxford on Saturday. We'll talk about that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning here on the Game. You hear me talking all the time about your home's foundation and why you really need to keep your eye on it. And I don't say that just to say it. I say it because it's really, really important. If you have any problems with your home foundation, notice anything at all, like maybe cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be sticking a little bit, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door, these could all be signs of serious foundation problems. If you're having any of these issues, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to cantycanfixit.com. Again, that's cantycanfixit.com, and Canty Foundation Specialist will send a professional out to your home to evaluate your home's foundation and get you and your family fixed up just right so you can live comfortably in your own home. Again, cantycanfixit.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist.
Cooper hugs up the basketball, and you can put Spurs on this. The Gamecocks on the road get it done again. Their 5th SEC road victory of the season, and this one comes in double-figure fashion as they defeat Ole Miss for the season sweep. Your final score is 72-59.
Welcome back in Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning. Derek Scott on the call Saturday afternoon out there in Oxford as, yes, the men's basketball team picking up the 72-59 win over the Rebels, completing the weekend sweep and getting themselves back on track a little bit. You know, that was definitely we've joked so much during football season about must-win games and how important it was to win this game or that game, which, again, when you're talking about a smaller sample size or smaller amount of games in a season, each game does take on a little bit more importance. But for Lamont Paris's team, winning Saturday's game was paramount to getting yourself back on the horse. You look at the 2 prior games against Auburn, losing by 40 points. Then blowing a 16-point lead to LSU at home. And there was a sense of nervousness, for me at least, and I feel like for a lot of people within the fan base going into Saturday's game in Oxford. It's like, okay, well, where's the team that was beating Kentucky? Where's the team that was beating Tennessee? Where's all that we were hyping up a couple weeks ago? Is it gone? Are we just hitting the skids now in the final couple weeks of the regular season? What do we need to do to get back on track? And, you know, going back to the Auburn loss, which, again, by 40 points on the road, that's tough. And I'm not saying that that's the reason why you lost to LSU, but the mental side of it could have played a part. You know, that classic case of letting one loss turn into 2, unfortunately, which is what happened against LSU. And you question, how did they respond? Now they had the entire week off. Didn't have to worry about a midweek game, all that kind of stuff. You can lock in not only on Ole Miss, but also on making yourself better, which from what we heard from Coach Paris, what we heard from the players all week long, that's what they did. Now you got to go out there and prove it on the court. And you're right to be nervous about playing a team like Ole Miss. This is one that came into Colonial Life Arena just a couple weeks ago and pushed you to your limit. 3-point game. Remember, they put up the last-second heave, and Jacoby Wright, I think it was Jacoby Wright, almost got called for a foul. Thankfully, he didn't, and South Carolina was able to come away with the win. And that was a game where they were killing you with those mid-range jumpers. You're also going into a place where Ole Miss had been really good at home this year. I think Auburn was their only home loss, and they were really good at utilizing their size to their advantage in that game a couple weeks back. But again, South Carolina goes in there, picks up the win, and comfortably so. This was a game that South Carolina pretty much controlled from the jump. Had the 14-point lead at halftime, and then, just kind of managed that gap in the second half, which, again, I think is exactly what the doctor ordered for this team that had been struggling as of late. I mentioned that size, and we talk about Jamarion Sharp being the 7'5" guy that he is, and how effective he was in that game a couple weeks back. It's funny, they only had 5 blocks in that first game. They had 11 in the game on Saturday, but South Carolina was still able to come away with the victory. Let's be cut number 8 here, Dave. Here's Coach Paris talking about South Carolina overcoming the blocks that Ole Miss was able to throw down on Saturday.
There was a point I thought in the first half, Jacoby made a really strong drive. I mean, really strong drive. There was body contact, and he was going to get there regardless, and didn't care if there was contact or not. He was very determined. It was a very intentional attack of the rim, and then he finished it off nicely. And so I think that really, at that point, I really saw us trying to make sure we attacked. And they're pressuring, and you have to do that. Yeah. You can't run offense as we know it when someone's going to pressure you like that outside. You have to. It's part of the reason that having guys that can space the floor is important. If the pressure gets high, you can attack off the dribble, and you have some outs kind of as to where guys are going to be in terms of our spacing. And so I thought we did a good job. Michi got down there and got fouled a couple times after he attacked. I thought that was a big part of what we were doing offensively, was we put our heads down against the pressure and attacked through some contact and got ourselves towards the basket.
It's one of those things that you can either shy away or you can be headstrong and push forward. And that's exactly what South Carolina did. As you mentioned, Jacoby Wright, Michi Johnson, BJ Mack had some good drives to the rim. Like, they weren't afraid when it came to playing hard down by the basket, despite, you know, what Ole Miss does bring to the court when it comes to size. South Carolina ends up with 34 points in the paint, effectively scoring half of their points down there near the basket, which is certainly good to see. One key element of this game, though, was the fact that you didn't have Miles Stute. Now, it's not the first time you didn't have Miles Stute, as he was out for those couple games after the injury against Georgia, the first time those two teams played. But when you go back to the first matchup these two teams had against each other, Miles Stute was a pivotal part of South Carolina's offense, scoring 12 points, all of those coming from 4 3-pointers that he ended up making in that game when he was coming off the bench. Didn't even make the trip on Saturday due to his injury, which I'll get to the update on that in just a moment. But when you're missing a key guy like that, it's like, okay, who is going to step up and who is going to kind of fill that void that they would bring to the court? That ended up being, for a lot of it, Zach Davis. And Coach Pierce talked about him, cut number 5 here, Dave, his performance on Saturday as well.
Yeah, he was really active. I thought he set the tone defensively for us right out of the gates and did some really good stuff and was flying around. And even a couple rebounds that he didn't get, he just flew into a crowd and tipped the ball to where we could chase it down. He was for the large part, for the most important, critical part of the game, he was extremely disciplined in his work, because it's work to do what he does out there. He was very disciplined in his work, and he let a couple loose at times where, that just were a couple of decisions that he got outside of the scope of what he wanted to get done. But I thought he was pivotal in terms of helping us establish what this day was going to look like from a defensive standpoint from our end.
So obviously he's not the guy that's going to go out there and shoot the 3-ball like Miles Stute does, but he still kind of picked up the slack in terms of adding more to the offense in light of Stute not being out there, going out there, getting 14 points and grabbing 9 rebounds on the defensive side of things, which, overall just one of his best performances of the entire season, which was great to great to see. Real quick though, cut number 9 here. This is Coach Paris talking about Stute's injury update.
Yeah, it's hard to get an idea of what the real scope of it is, but, some of it is like in that first 24, 48 hours, how his body responds to the injury. So I think as we get back there this afternoon, I'll reach out to him and Mark, and I think by tomorrow we'll have a better idea of it. But I do know this, it could have been significantly worse, kind of like when his shoulder, he was out for 3 games or whatever it was, but that could have been significantly worse, and certainly this could have been significantly worse also.
So it sounds like it's not too terrible, and as Coach Paris mentioned, we'll get some updates here this week about what's going on with Miles Stute, and hopefully can get him back in the fold pretty soon. But South Carolina has shown multiple times this year that even without, again, one of their better players on offense, that they can still go out there, be very effective, and come away with wins. Thankfully, as far as injuries go, Zachary Davis was not injured himself on Saturday after a very, very flagrant foul was done to him by Alan Flanagan of Ole Miss early on in the second half there, and the under the basket camera caught just a vicious forearm being thrown his way. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That was very blatant, very obvious, and got Alan Flanagan kicked out of the game. And I'll be very interested to see how the conference itself responds to this. Now, Coach Paris didn't dive too much into this in his post-game presser, and Chris Beard effectively said he didn't really see it when it happened, so didn't get too much detail from the coaches there. But I imagine the league office is going to take a look at this, because the replay that we saw in the game on Saturday was pretty brutal and pretty vicious, and there's just no place for that in in college basketball. So we'll see what ends up happening with Alan Flanagan going forward. We'll stick with basketball, kind of look ahead to what's next for this team, and where they go from here. As again, we inch closer and closer to the start of the postseason. Real quick, though, I want to remind you about the Rivalry Friday ticket giveaway coming up this weekend. Gamecocks taking on Clemson, 3-game set, 1 game here, 1 game at Segra Park on Saturday, then 1 game at Clemson on Sunday. Friday night's game at Founders Park. You have the opportunity to win some tickets to go see it. All you got to do, real simple, just go to our YouTube channel, The Game TV, subscribe, and then go to 1075thegame.com and fill out the respective form. Hit submit for your opportunity, again, to win tickets to see Clemson come in to Founders Park and take on our Gamecocks here on Friday night. Again, the Rivalry Friday ticket giveaway on our YouTube channel and 1075thegame.com. We'll look ahead to what's next for the men's basketball team and their postseason aspirations as well here on The Game. Welcome back in. Next Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Monday morning. Cap and Dave producing on the other side of the glass. Appreciate you guys as always watching on the Game TV, sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. I want to remind you about the 1075thegame.com or 1075 The Game Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway, as we are in the thick of baseball season now. And with every game that passes, $25 gets added to the pot until we eventually see a Gamecock hitter hit a grand slam. You know it's going to happen at some point. They are killing the baseball so far this season. So whenever one does, as long as you're signed up and registered, you could be the lucky winner of whatever amount of money is in the pot at that point in time. Again, $25 gets added in every single game until a Gamecock hitter hits a grand slam. Again, thanks to our friends over Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union for the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Just go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win today. Sticking with basketball, we talked so much going into the weekend about what South Carolina needed to do over the course of these last couple games of the regular season to put themselves in a good position as far as the postseason goes. And Terry and I talked about this a lot last week. We kind of landed on that number of winning 2 out of your last 5 games, which South Carolina's schedule to close out the season is not easy. That game at Oxford on Saturday was a tough road environment. Check that off. Got the win. You go on the road to A&M coming up on Wednesday, another tough road environment. Then you got a ranked Florida team followed by a ranked Tennessee team, both those teams at home, and then closing out the season with a very physical Mississippi State team that you did beat earlier on in the year, but you got to go to their house to close out the year. So it's certainly not going to be easy by any means, but Coach Paris, cut number 12 here, Dave. Coach Paris talked on Saturday after the game about the satisfaction of getting back in the win column after that 2-game skid against Auburn and LSU.
A lot. I think this is confidence has always been very important in the minds of anyone in general, but certainly of any college-aged person that's competing in a sport of any kind. You get the yips, and you're not going to make 4-foot putts all of a sudden, even though you've made 4-foot putts since you've been 9 years old. Confidence. I think confidence is such an important thing. So I thought it was important from that standpoint because, you lose in the fashion that we did at Auburn, right? And I don't know who's in first place in the NBA. I'm not up on my NBA viewing right now, but I think they would have beat that team that day. That's not to excuse our role in what that game was, but they were really good, Auburn was, in that game. So you lose in that fashion in that game, then you lose in another fashion, which is even to your psyche and confidence more damning because you're up 16 points in the second half and you put it on cruise control in some ways, and then you come back and you lose. And then the fashion in which we lost that game, I've just got able to move forward. And so your confidence, you can say it all you want and pretend that there's no shaking your confidence. There's a crack in your confidence if you're a 19, 20, 21-year-old college athlete. And so I thought it was really important to be able to come in here against a good team, okay? You don't trip and fall and accidentally end up with the wins that this team has had, Ole Miss. And so I thought it was really important to them for their confidence to be able to come in here under the circumstance. We're getting towards the very end of, everybody's talking about NCAA tournament. Who needs to do this to bolster their resume and all these things. To come in here and play well and win like that, I thought it was tremendously important for the confidence of these guys.
And with 4 games to go in the regular season, you still technically have a chance to win the SEC regular season championship. Coming away from Saturday, Tennessee and Alabama tied at the top of the league standings, and South Carolina sitting in 3rd right now. 1 game, or I guess technically it would be 4th, 1 game back, considering the fact that Auburn does have the tiebreaker over them as of right now. But still, things kind of get a little wonky over these next couple weeks. There's still an opportunity that South Carolina could find themselves walking away with the regular season championship in the SEC. Now, Tennessee and Alabama still have to play each other another time, so one of those teams will fall. Obviously, South Carolina has a tiebreaker over Tennessee as of right now. Still got to play them again here in a couple weeks' time as well. And, of course, Alabama has a tiebreaker over South Carolina. There's so many scenarios and so many different tiebreakers and stuff like that. But the most important thing at the end of the day is being in position to get one of the double byes, be one of the top 4 seeds in the SEC tournament when that rolls around here in a couple weeks. And, again, South Carolina still in a very good position to to be able to do that. I'm checking. I've been up refreshing at these last couple minutes. Bracketology has still not come out for this week as of yet. Last update was on Friday morning at 10 a.m., where South Carolina at that point in time was, still, I believe, a 7 seed as they were coming into the week. So I don't know how much beating a team, 7 seed would have them playing Nevada as a 10 seed in the first round. So I don't know how much beating Ole Miss really changes that. But again, South Carolina win another game or two over these next couple weeks and solidly lock yourself in to the to the NCAA tournament. When you look at where South Carolina sits as far as the net goes, 47th overall, jumping in to the top 50. Once again, 3-3 against Quad 1 teams overall, or Quad 1 games overall this season, 5-0 against Quad 2. So feeling pretty good about that, obviously, which, in terms of South Carolina's resume going into the postseason. And you still have tough games. Again, Florida and Tennessee, both 2 ranked teams as of right now. Not to mention a very sneaky Texas A&M team coming up on Wednesday night that you can't really take lightly. They're a team that, especially at home, has pulled off some pretty impressive victories this year over the likes of Tennessee and Kentucky themselves. Now, they've been on a skid, losing 4 straight games, including a blowout game against Tennessee this past weekend. So hopefully you're catching them at a good time where they are trending in the wrong direction. South Carolina can walk out of College Station with another victory, again, ahead of playing the likes of Florida and Tennessee back-to-back over the next couple of games after that. But again, this is a team that nobody expected anything out of this year. They have exceeded everyone's expectations, and now we'll see what they do over the next couple of weeks to firmly position themselves as far as the postseason goes with the NCAA tournament, which, hey, it feels so good to be able to talk about a team that is going to be in the NCAA tournament, barring just some kind of monumental collapse of these next couple weeks, which I don't see happening. So something to be excited for there. Obviously, the women's team handling business on their own, which we'll get to here in a little bit as well. Want to jump back into the Colty conversation. A lot of you weighing in on the Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100 about your feelings about James Coley jumping ship and heading off to Georgia after just being introduced as South Carolina's wide receivers coach a little over a month ago. We'll get to some of your thoughts coming up. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning here on The Game.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I just want to give my gratitude to Coach Beamer, Coach Tanner, and Chance Miller for giving me this opportunity to coach at this great university. You know, I've been on the sideline and been on the other end of a great atmosphere and electric fan base that's passionate about what they do. And it's you sit there and you say, wow, this is a great place. And for me, it's an honor to be a part of Coach Beamer's staff, because of the man he is, because of the type of coach he is. For me, it's awesome. And for my family, it's an honor just to be a part of this great university. So.
Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Monday morning. Cap and Dave producing on the other side of the glass. That was James Coley a little over a month ago being formally introduced here at South Carolina as their wide receivers coach. We obviously know now that he has decided to leave to go take the same job at the University of Georgia. And I saw a range of reactions to this over the weekend on social media and the like, in terms of the South Carolina fan base and how people are feeling about this move. And I posed the same question a little bit earlier when we talked about it at the top of the hour. How are you feeling? What are your thoughts on this? And I got a couple different responses here on the Firehouse Subs text line. Appreciate you guys weighing in. Justin says the only thing this shows is there is no respect for Shane Beamer in coaching circles. This has happened. This has now happened multiple times. I can understand that sentiment. I don't know if that necessarily means disrespect from Beamer's standpoint, but it may be just be a situation where, again, with Coley here, you're looking at what's just maybe a better opportunity overall and likely more money as well. So maybe that's I can see that's the reason why he decided to jump there. Steve weighs in and says, I'm feeling betrayed. Sounds like Coley was just using South Carolina as a springboard. I don't think he really wanted to be here anyway. Sounds like an ambulance chaser. That's an interesting way to put it. Well, here's the thing about James Coley. He has no, ties necessarily to South Carolina. This wasn't like this was a dream destination job for him or anything like that. And again, he had the prior relationship with Coach Beamer from their time at Georgia as assistants together. But again, that's not necessarily ironclad. And again, I go back to the earlier point where if you're being offered more money at what, on paper is a better job as of right now, I can understand why you would want to take that. And again, that kind of goes back to what Coley ended up doing. I want to tie these two texts in here together because they're kind of saying the same thing. Nameless texter says, James Coley leaving is just college football. It happens all the time. And Rich says, didn't we do the exact same kind of thing to Georgia State? And you bring up good points because that's effectively where college football kind of is now. Where, people like to talk about loyalty and all that kind of stuff. There's really not loyalty. At the end of the day, if you're a coach, you got to be selfish. If you're a player, you got to be selfish as well. But coaches, specifically as we're talking about here, you're going to look out for what the best opportunity for you is. James Coley believes that if he goes to Georgia as the wide receivers coach, where again, I assume he's making more money, that's going to be the best opportunity for him. Where he's going to be with a program that is expected to be in the college football playoff conversation, expected to, have several guys that are potentially going to get drafted out of the wide receiver room this upcoming year as well. And James Coley has decided he wants to be a part of that. On the flip side of things, as Rich just mentioned, look at Georgia State. They had their head coach who'd been at the helm for 7 years and was already leading their spring practice, getting set for the 2024 season. Saw an opportunity to come to South Carolina, a place that he has an affinity for and had been here previously, and chose to leave his program behind. So it does definitely work both ways. Now, it's a little bit different when you're talking about a guy going from Georgia State to South Carolina as opposed to going from South Carolina to Georgia, because that's Power 5 to Power 5, which a lot of people see as a little bit more of a lateral move. But again, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, the classic windshield and the bug situation. So again, that's just kind of how it goes in college football these days. Ryan weighs in on couple similar thoughts with that. He says a couple things here. It's frustrating. We did just take a coach from Georgia State, so can't really be upset about it. This type of stuff is exactly why I have no issues with players transferring. It's not like he's going to have to sit out a year. He also puts in need a massive buyout in Lamont Paris's contract as well. That's a different conversation, but something I don't disagree with you on there. But relating back to James Coley here, point number 3 is something that we haven't mentioned as of yet. You know, people get very upset with players, especially in today's world of the transfer portal and NIL, with not being committed to programs and jumping here and jumping there. At the end of the day, the coaches do it too. The coaches have always been doing it, quite frankly. It's just now we're getting into in the era where players have the ability to do this themselves, and they're doing it because there's nothing that prevents them from doing that. There's no more transfer rule where they have to sit out a year, or for the most part, or coaches barring players from transferring within their own conference or stuff like that. It's truly wide open. So the players are just emulating what they've seen from the coaches for all these years and saying, hey, well, if you guys can do it, I can do it too. And again, especially in today's world of NIL, similarly to with Coley going to Georgia, if I'm a player at X school and school Y says, hey, come play for us, we're going to offer you 100,000 more in NIL opportunities, well, guess what? I'm probably going to take that. Even if it is, the program maybe not as good, or maybe it's even better. If it's even better, that's great. I'm going to go to a better program, and I'm going to get more money out of it. Of course, I'm going to take that opportunity. And again, that's what we've seen with coaches for years and years and years. So many coaches have said, I'm going to be the head coach of this team, and then 2 days later, they're not. No, I haven't interviewed for that job, and 2 days later, they're being introduced as that head coach or that coordinator, or whatever it may be. So it's been going on for a long time. And we're almost numb to it with coaches. But we're still in the early stages of it with players. But at the end of the day, they're doing the same thing. So can we really be upset about them? Can we really talk about loyalty with coaches without mentioning it with coaches? Because it goes both ways. Or loyalty with players without talking about it with coaches, because nobody's loyal at the end of the day. Everybody's looking out for themselves and looking out for their best opportunity. And that's just sports at the end of the day. And again, James Coley's the latest example of that. We'll get more on this as this morning rolls along. We're going to jump into some baseball coming up next as we jump into hour number 2, as the baseball team was successful over the weekend, taking 2 of the games against Belmont out at Founders Park. That's all coming up. Hour number 2 here on the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday morning on The Game. I want to remind you once again about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialists. We do have some rain that's going to be coming in a little bit later on in the week. And if you have an open crawl space and recently experienced a storm, you might have some standing water under your home. High humidity and condensation in that crawl space can create an environment for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can also lead to wood rot and floor joist problems. Musty smells or awful odors can come from mold or mildew in your crawl space, and that might cause some serious health issues to you and your family living within your home, things like runny nose, itchy eyes, or coughs, because up to half the air that you breathe comes from your crawl space. If you're having any of these problems, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to cantycanfix.com and schedule an appointment so they can come out and check out your crawl space to make sure you and your family can live comfortably. Again, our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist.
and he rips this to deep left. And it's going to be a 2-home run day for Cole Messina, who calls ball game. A corner pantry home run from Cole Messina, his second of the afternoon, a 2-run shot once again, and the Gamecocks will take the lead out to 12-1, and that should do it for this contest.
Welcome back into the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Monday morning. Derek Scott on the call yesterday. Gamecocks Radio Network, and indeed that Cole Messina home run blast did end up wrapping up the weekend series for South Carolina against Belmont, them taking the 12-1 victory after 8 innings in game number 3. That is their 4th run roll game of the season. Had the 3 straight between Miami of Ohio, Winthrop, and Queens last week. And again, wrapping up the series against Belmont this past weekend. Now, they did not get through the weekend undefeated. Unfortunately, did drop that game on Saturday by a score of 11-2, but, you know, losses happen. That's just the world of college baseball. That's just world of baseball in general, not just college baseball. So, you know, even when you're playing some of these mid-major programs, you can run into a game where, you know, things kind of are going their way and aren't going yours. I look no further than, you know, in the upstate, Clemson took on Kennesaw State on Friday, and they got shellacked 18-1, but rebounded and won their 2 games on Saturday and Sunday to end up taking the series. So, not something to harp too much on. Again, it happens. And at the end of the day, you still won the series, which, again, is the most, you know, the most important thing. And as it stands right now, there's only 3 undefeated teams left in the SEC, those being Bama, Texas A&M, and Georgia. And Georgia needed 2 walk-offs in their Saturday and Sunday games against Northern Kentucky to stay undefeated. So, again, not the end of the world. You bounce back on Sunday, got the win, and wrapped the series with a, you know, with the victory. Cut number 16 here, Dave. Coach Kingston talked about the importance of being able to wrap up the series with the victory like they did on Sunday.
Yeah, obviously the way we wanted these guys to respond today, we responded. We challenged them that, you know, yesterday everything that could go wrong went wrong, and so it's how you respond to it. And I thought Roman set the tone today. Kennedy Jones in the leadoff spot set the tone today. So to get back to the kind of baseball we've been playing all year after yesterday's disappointment, I thought was a great sign. So Kimball, Becker, Gainey, all were dominant, and that's where you always need to start.
And that's my biggest takeaway from the game on Sunday is what you saw out of both Roman Kimball and Matthew Becker, 2 guys that are obviously, you know, working back from those lat injuries that they suffered now 2 Sundays ago in, you know, the final scrimmages of the preseason. They're 2 guys that were very integral parts of your staff coming into the season that you have unfortunately had to slowly begin to, you know, integrate back into things a little bit here. But both those guys went out there, had very solid performances on Sunday. Roman Kimball went 4 innings, only giving up 2 hits and 1 run with 4 strikeouts. And Becker went 3 innings, 2 hits, no runs, and 5 strikeouts himself. Kimball threw 65 pitches. Becker threw 55, which, again, is a little bit of a bump up from the 40. I believe both of them hit 40 last week in their, you know, first respective outings of the season. Becker hit 45 on his midweek, and then Kimball hit 40 in his performance last Sunday. So those guys ramping up the number of pitches a little bit. Again, kind of working their way back into full strength. And Kingston did say that they should be in the area of 80 pitches coming up this weekend, which, I mean, that's about as close to full strength as possible in terms of, you know, what you're asking out of these guys, which, again, for the fact that, you know, Roman Kimball was able to go 4 innings on those 65 pitches, you're talking about getting him up, you know, another 15 to the 80 range. That's at least hopefully 1 more inning, maybe even getting you to 6 innings there if things are going well enough for him. So again, feel good about that with him as far as being your Sunday starter, which is, you know, what he was, you know, thought to be before the season started anyway, before that lat injury. So coming along nicely there. The question really is with Matthew Becker, who, again, we got to see coming out of the bullpen yesterday with solid performance there. I'm interested to see what they're going to do as far as the weekend rotation coming up against Clemson, which, again, is a sizable jump up in competition level to what you've played so far, and will be the true litmus test on where this team is early on in the season. Of course, Dylan Eskew was the Saturday starter these past 2 weekends, struggled a little bit on Saturday, 5 innings, 3 hits, giving up 5 runs, 3 strikeouts in his 73 pitches on Saturday. Really started to lose the handle there in the 5th and 6th inning. Also hit 3 batters on Saturday as well. So, and again, it's a one-game sample. It's a one-game, anomaly possibly where he could come out on Saturday against Clemson and pitch a lights-out performance. So I don't think you need to glean anything from just one outing there. But it is going to be an interesting decision to see what Mark Kingston, what Matt Williams end up doing as far as the rotation for the upcoming weekend. You do have the one midweek game coming up against Gardner-Webb tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, so we'll see what they do. Probably end up being another staff day at the end of the day and see kind of what their options are as far as, evaluating what the starting lineup could look like for this upcoming weekend, taking on Clemson. But overall, you feel good about the pitching staff. Everything you've seen out of these guys so far, minus that rough outing on Saturday, and it wasn't just Matthew Becker. Veach came in. He gave up 3 hits and 3 runs. Williamson came in. He also gave up 3 hits and 3 runs. So it's just, again, one of those days where things were just really clicking for Belmont, and unfortunately not going South Carolina's way, really at all. From an offensive standpoint, another great weekend, minus what happened on Saturday. What happened on Saturday as well, which even then, and I heard Coach Kingston talking about this in the pregame yesterday, driving around a little bit, when asked about Saturday's rough outing, he said, we hit 311 as a team on Saturday and still lost the game, which by, the statistical history, whenever we do that, I think they only had 1 loss previously. So, just kind of one of those weird games, and pointing the finger at, Cole Messina here, who did end up having the 2 home runs on Sunday, had 2 pretty deep flyouts to center field on Saturday as well. And Coach Kingston said, based on the numbers that we have and the analytics, the velocity of those hits, if the wind wasn't blowing a certain way, those would have been home runs too. So we could be talking about Cole Messina having a 4 home run weekend as opposed to just 2. But unfortunately, again, it's kind of one of those things, the wind's not blowing your way. And then it ends up, being caught for flyouts instead, which Messina had a monster close to the weekend after that, a little bit of a shaky start, had 3 strikeouts on Friday night, goes 1 for 4 on Saturday. Again, 2 of those flyouts could have ended up being home runs, but rebounds on Sunday, going 2 for 4 with those 2 home runs in the 3rd game of the series. Also elsewhere, you had Gavin Casas, who finally got back on track offensively to start the season, where he was 1 hit through his first 4 games played this year, sat out one of the games last week, but then rebounds and has 3 hits and 5 RBIs over the course of the of the weekend as well. So good to see him, really kind of clicking gear for the first time this season. One of the big stories from yesterday to me was Kennedy Jones going out there and having a great performance, going 2 for 4 with, with 3 RBIs. And one of the big position battles this offseason was that left field spot where you had Blake Jackson, Kennedy Jones, even Ryan Bakes was factoring into that as well. And he also had, he also got the start yesterday as well. But, Blake Jackson, who has turned out to be very solid in that leadoff role for South Carolina through the first couple games that we got to see him so far, won the starting role. And that means that, a guy like Kennedy Jones is going to have to be coming off the bench. But when he got his opportunity to start yesterday, did a phenomenal job. As I mentioned, 2 for 4 with the 3 RBIs there. This will be cut number 17 here, Dave. Coach Kingston was asked, is Kennedy Jones working himself into more playing time with performances like that?
Sure it does. When you play well, you play more. That's just the way sports works. And we thought the matchup was really good today. He's a lifetime 400 hitter versus lefties. And we just thought with them throwing a lefty today, it was the perfect time to insert him there. We took 2 lefties out and put 2 righties in. And you've got to explore your roster early in the season. You've got to explore what you have. And he's kept a very good attitude, through the disappointment of not playing early. And it's great to see when guys get rewarded for that.
As Kingston mentioned, it was more of a matchup type deal for why he got his opportunity yesterday to start. But again, you continue to put together performances like this, you're getting the opportunity to get to play more and more as the season goes along. And that's the benefit of these early seasons against mid-majors, where in a lot of games, if you're a good enough team like South Carolina is, you're hopefully going to be run-ruling teams, or at least being up by a large margin as you get into these middle and late innings, where you have the opportunity to work in a lot of guys, see a lot of guys get on the field and really evaluate what you have before you have this daunting slate of conference play coming up here in a couple weeks. And Kennedy Jones is the perfect example of that. And you'd rather have 11 really, really good players and being able to only play 9 of them, as opposed to only having 7 really, really good players and having to just kind of fill in the rest, however you're able to. So feel good about where South Carolina's at from both a pitching and an offensive standpoint early on in the season, which is good. And we knew the offense was likely going to be good as it was a season ago. Pitching was a little bit of the question mark. And again, coming up this weekend as you take on Clemson will be a really good litmus test on where exactly you stand, as of right now. What kind of adjustments need to be made? What kind of things can get better and can get improved on before you get into conference play, taking on Ole Miss, here in just a couple weeks' time. But first, you got to get through the midweek game, that being Gardner-Webb. Coming up tomorrow, first pitch at 4 o'clock, pregame coverage starting right here on the game at 3:45 as South Carolina looks to pick up yet another victory to improve to 8-1 on the season for, again, welcoming in Clemson. First game of that series Friday night coming up at 7 o'clock at Founders Park, where I'll remind you once again, you can have the opportunity to win tickets to that with our Rivalry Friday ticket giveaway. All you got to do is go to our YouTube channel, The Game TV, subscribe to us, and then go to 1075thegame.com, fill out the respective form, hit submit, and you could be the lucky winner of some tickets to go see Carolina take on Clemson out at Founders Park coming up on Friday. Women's team was in action yesterday, and oh boy, did they run roughshod over the Kentucky Wildcats up there in Lexington. We'll dive into that a little bit. Let's hear what Dawn Staley had to say coming away from it as they continue to roll as the lone undefeated team in the nation, inching closer and closer to hopefully another national championship here in just a little over a month's time. That's coming up. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, Captain Dave, producing on the other side of the glass here on The Game.
Wildcats can perhaps get one more shot at the basket. Amia Jenkins up top. Gamecocks will improve to 27-0, 14-0 in the SEC. There will be no sharing of this SEC title as the Gamecocks will sweep the regular season series from the Wildcats. They go over 100 points for the 6th time this year. With 2 seconds to play, the Wildcats will not even take a shot. Gamecocks take care of Kentucky here at Rep, 103-55.
Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tyler Head with you Monday morning. Brad Muller on the call yesterday. Gamecocks Radio Network as the women dominated against Kentucky, 103-55. Sweeping the series would be an understatement. South Carolina beat them earlier on in the year at home by 62 points, 98-36, and then only beat them by 58 points yesterday. Just a complete mauling of Kentucky on 2 different occasions this season. But important to point out there, as he mentioned, South Carolina will not be sharing the SEC regular season crown this season. LSU was in a position that if South Carolina did manage to lose their final 3 games of the regular season and LSU won, they would lay claim to a share of the SEC regular season crown. That's not going to happen. South Carolina only has 2 more games. LSU is 3 games back. You can do the math there. Obviously, we saw the trophy presentation last week, so there'll be no sharing of that this year for South Carolina. And, I mean, just when you think this team can't get any more impressive, they go out there and put out a performance like they did last night or yesterday afternoon. Now, again, from a matchup standpoint, South Carolina is clearly the better team. But it's something to go out there and drop 100 points on any team, let alone a conference team. First 100-point game that South Carolina has had in conference play this year. And, I mean, we could be here all day just kind of handing out the accolades of who had great performances on Sunday. Chloe Kitts had a double-double, 10 points, 12 rebounds. Watkins had 13 points of herself. Bree Hall with 18 points. Pow with 11 points, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. Coming off the bench, Full Wiley, 17 points herself. Sanaya Fagan had a really big game with 16 points. Like, the list just goes on and on and on. And just speaks to how deep this team truly is. And that was, once again, a storyline going into the weekend, as it was against Alabama the other day and had been for a couple games before when she was with her Brazilian national team. You were without Camila Cardoso, who is your best player, who is your biggest player, and, does things out there on the court that other girls just aren't able to do. And you always wonder, okay, how is this team going to respond? How is this team going to play without her, which they've now gotten used to at this point, which I've talked about so many times. That when you look at the NCAA tournament coming up in a couple weeks' time, whether it be foul trouble or, knock on wood, God forbid, an injury or something like that, you may end up being put in situations where you're having to play without Cardoso for a significant period of time. How do you respond? Are you as good of a team without your best player? And the answer is resounding yes. Cut number 27 here, Dave. Here is Coach Staley talking about her team playing well without Cardoso being out on the court.
Well, I'm confident that our players show us each and every game that what they're capable of, but I do think our practices are areas in which give me pause, because we don't execute like this in practice. We don't, and it's great balance. It's great balance in that it drives us as coaches to continue to see these type of performances in practice, because you never know, when that practice team might show up in a game, and that is what keeps us on our toes and keeps us up at night to make sure that team doesn't show up. And I do think we have good male practice players that we call highlighters that really challenge us to the point where we don't really know how good we are. And then we have performances like this that shows that we're a really good basketball team, and we show up on game day. But we can't just rely on that. We got to perform like that in practice.
You know that you have beaten an opponent down when you're talking more about practice post-game than you are the actual game that you just played. And let's be honest, when it comes to South Carolina, practicing against themselves, that's probably a tougher matchup than a lot of these teams they face, even within the SEC. That's how good South Carolina is. And again, they've already locked out the SEC regular season crown, going to be the top seed going into the SEC tournament, going to be number 1 seed going in the NCAA tournament, all those great accolades that we fully expect to see out of this team on a year in, year out basis. And Coach Staley, cut number 28 here, talking about how prepared she believes this team is for the postseason here coming up.
I mean, this team really surprises me every day. Every time that we play a game, they have something about them, a competitiveness in them that they don't want to lose, and they find ways to win no matter how teams are approaching us, no matter how how the game mucks up or how the game is smooth, or they find a way to win basketball games, and that's a sign of a really good team. I'm not gonna say that we're not a good basketball. We're a really good basketball team when we are playing like we played today. Locking up defensively and then sharing the basketball offensively and making sure that the right people are taking the best shot on the floor. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge every day because we haven't lost a game, and our players are thinking that this is the way it is, and it really isn't, because the competition gets better and better as we approach postseason. So we want to give our players their flowers, but we also know that there's work to do.
As we've talked about so much, this was a team that everybody expected to be good. Going back to their preseason AP ranking of number 6, that's theoretically saying, hey, we think this team's good enough to make the Elite 8. We just don't know if it's a national championship caliber team, which you can play the disrespect card if you want to from that front. I completely understand that, because you lost amazing talent at the end of last year. A team that was undefeated, was on the cusp of playing for national championship, didn't quite get there. Iowa got in the way, obviously, with with Caitlin Clark, but you lose that caliber of talent that they lost. It's not unrealistic to think they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. So the fact that they've been able to do what they've done this year, be undefeated, dominate the way they've dominated a lot of these games, even when they aren't playing their best basketball, like we saw in games against, Tennessee, against Georgia a couple weeks back, even for the early stages of that game against LSU where they were down for a lot of it, they always find a way to win, which gives you the utmost confidence, as it should, when we talk about the NCAA tournament. That, especially when you're talking about facing the lower seeds in those first couple rounds, and look, you can't overlook any opponent. I get it. Anything can happen in basketball and all that kind of stuff. But if South Carolina handles their business, if they don't make stupid mistakes, there's no reason to think that this team should be in the Final Four once again. Now, again, when you get to the Final Four, we know things can happen, and depending on the matchup, and maybe you get Iowa again, who knows, depending on how the seeding works out and all that kind of stuff. But this is a team that I expect to look, as it usually does in the NCAA tournament, dominant, and then hopefully being able to handle their business against the tougher teams as you get into the later stages. But I can't stress this enough, how exciting a time it is in Columbia right now in terms of basketball. The women's team is always good. We're almost kind of numb to that. Men's team getting set to be in the NCAA tournament here in a couple weeks. Just an enjoyable springtime with so much good basketball going on here in Columbia. Want to jump to something a little bit more national that kind of got lost in the news cycle over the weekend, a classic Friday news dump, if you will. That is the latest of the NCAA versus the state of Tennessee and Virginia, and the ruling that came away from that. We'll dive into that coming up. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on your Monday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. Next point. Tyler Head, Captain Dave producing on the other side of the glass with you on this Monday morning. Busy week coming up here on the game. I mentioned a little bit earlier, baseball in action, taking on Gardner-Webb coming up tomorrow afternoon, 4 o'clock first pitch. Pregame coverage starting at 3:45. On Thursday, got our classic doubleheader of Carolina Calls with Coach Paris at 6 o'clock. And then Thursday night, women's basketball taking on Arkansas at 9 o'clock. Men's team will be in action Wednesday, taking on Texas A&M. Pregame coverage starting at 8 o'clock for a 8:30 tip out there in College Station. Obviously, a lot happened over the weekend from a Gamecock sports standpoint, so maybe you didn't notice this. Maybe it got lost in the shuffle with that classic Friday news dump, but we got some news out of the NCAA's court battle with the attorney generals of both the states of Tennessee and Virginia. Let's hear from Andy Staples of On3, detailing a little bit of the takeaways from what happened over the weekend.
The federal judge in Tennessee has declared the NCAA's NIL rules essentially illegal for now, at least in the states of Tennessee and Virginia, which were the states that sued the NCAA over its NIL rules. But what this effectively does is means the NIL rules from the NCAA that the schools made are not in effect at the moment and probably are not coming back, because typically when a preliminary injunction gets granted, the rules or the matter at issue isn't coming back.
So what does that mean at the end of the day? Does that mean that there's no NIL rules at all? In a way, yes. In a way, no. As of right now, these rules are applying to the states of Tennessee and Virginia, but it kind of expands a little bit further because it's similar. The reason this whole situation started with Tennessee is revolving around Nico Iamaleava, the 5-star quarterback from California, who was said to have benefited from NIL before signing with, the University of Tennessee. And he'd signed with Aspire Sports Group, which, it was kind of a backdoor way of going around the NIL rules by saying, hey, he's working with these guys, not the university directly, even though they're a collective with the university. And it was a whole, kind of a mess of a situation. But Tennessee, by the letter of the law, was in the right, at the end of the day. And to no surprise, the NCAA once again getting its teeth kicked in here because everything that they do ends up violating antitrust. And we talked about the unintended consequences of making rule changes. And essentially, when the NCAA implemented NIL back in the summer of 2021, the rule was, okay, you can benefit from your name, image, and likeness, but only after you are already signed with a institution on campus there. Then, only then, can you start to explore those opportunities? Well, that violates antitrust, which, going back to the crux of the matter with this situation here with Tennessee and Virginia, you're telling the student athletes that they cannot explore the market for their best value. And again, that goes back to violating the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1892, I believe. I've talked more about that than I ever thought that I would. Andy Staples there of On3 mentioned something else in a short little video that he put out over the weekend about this. The perfect comparison is, let's say you're searching for a job and 3 different companies are offering you the job, but they won't tell you the salary, and you will not know the salary until you get to day one of whatever job you end up choosing. Well, if the one you end up choosing is $20,000 a year and the one you turn down is $100,000 a year, well, that's not in your best interest to not be able to know what that salary is prior to making that decision. So again, the NCAA was seemingly preventing that from happening because they didn't want this to become pay for play and all that kind of stuff. But let's be honest here. We're not stupid. We know what was happening anyway. We know these things were being negotiated through nefarious means? Was this directly collectives or the university saying, hey, if you come to our school, we'll give you X amount of dollars? It wasn't, but there was back channels to it. There was middlemen. What used to be bagmen back in the day before NIL became a thing, the ones that were taking the literal bags of money to recruits and their families or handing them out the McDonald's drive-through window. If you're in Knoxville, Tennessee, those guys or that job essentially became molded into being these middlemen. To where, okay, well, you're not the one handing over money to the recruits necessarily, but you're the one that's going to deliver the messages between the university, the institution, the player, all that kind of stuff, saying, hey, theoretically, if you went to this school, you could get this much in NIL opportunity. And then another school says, well, theoretically, if you came to our school, you could get this much in NIL opportunity, which again, by the letter of the NCAA's law was illegal, but from a court ruling, it's not. So now that opens it up all the way to where this, and again, we're only a couple days removed from this, and we'll see what the fallout ends up being, but essentially it's going to bring pay for play above ground to where, as if I'm a 5-star quarterback recruit coming out of high school, I can look at all these schools that are offering me and saying, okay, what are you going to pay me to come? And I can say, okay, well, Michigan's going to offer me $700,000. Texas is going to offer me $900,000, and Ohio State's going to offer me $1 million. Well, I think I'm going to go to Ohio State. Like, literally, that's what we're on the cusp of seeing here with, the current way things are structured with NIL. How does all this get alleviated, perhaps? Make the athletes employees. As we've been saying over and over and over again, just bring it all in. Make them employees. And again, there's a lot of steps in this process. Easier said than done. But that seems to be the only solution that's going to make sense inevitably. Now, that means, of course, you have to collectively bargain. That means you have to bring the players to the table to sit down with the conferences, with the TV partners, with, the NCAA itself, and say, okay, how are we going to structure this thing? Because that seems to be where we're heading. And in a case like that, I don't know what the number is, but let's say you just pay every scholarship athlete $70,000 to be on the football team. Now, that doesn't mean that star quarterback or star wide receiver, running back, whatever it may be, can't go out and seek further NIL opportunities. They absolutely can. But we'll finally get away from having to ask just the general public to be the ones funding bringing players to these schools. Because, again, it's been pay for play this entire time. We're not naive. And this is where a lot of coaches have voiced their frustration that they're having to go. They already speak to booster clubs anyway. But they're having to go just to the general public and saying, hey, we need you to donate your money. I don't care if it's $20 or $200 so we can get good talent to this program. And that's something they're not in control of either. They can beg and plead all they want, but it's up to the people within the fan base or the alumni to give the money that they need. And some places are more, more predisposed to having that kind of access, having those kind of resources, as opposed to others. You got a whole lot easier job getting people to donate to your NIL collective at Ohio State, which they've done recently and done a really good job of being able to bring in some good talent here in the transfer portal, as opposed to, Illinois. I guarantee you the Illinois' NIL budget is a fraction of what Ohio State's is, just because the program itself, the care that the fan base has for the program and the history of it. So we've created this improper balance in the age of NIL because it has always been pay for play. It's just been under the table, so to speak. Now that essentially the NCAA rules are becoming nullified, how does that change? It's not going to happen overnight, and there's like 5 other court cases the NCAA is tied up with right now. We focused on this one because it's been such a big deal, and the chancellor of the University of Tennessee had that great letter firing back at the NCAA, and we knew they were going to lose, and they did. We called it. because they always lose, because everything that they does violates antitrust laws. And when you continue to peel back the power of the NCAA, well, that puts more power in the hands of the players, puts more power in the hands of collectives, the institutions, all that kind of stuff. Where this goes, what's the ultimate end destination, end goal? We can't see it right now. But it's got to be something involving the athletes being employees. That's what makes the most sense. How long will it take to get there? I don't know. But it's got to come sooner rather than later. It only makes sense. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour, put a bow on the extra point, get you set for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head along with you, Cabernet producing on the other side of the glass. This is your Monday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. A couple more minutes here before Wes and Chris jump in with me for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. I want to give you another reminder here about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Every baseball game, $25 gets added to the pot, and when a Gamecock hitter eventually hits a home run, and with the way they're tearing the cover off the ball, it's going to happen at some point this season. Whenever that Grand Slam does happen this year, you could be the lucky winner of however much money is in the pot at at that point in time. Just go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Dave, put your headphones on. I got to bring you in on this one because I might have saw the dumbest thing I've seen in a while over the weekend. Did you see the Cam Newton video? You familiar with this?
I have not seen that video.
Cam Newton, obviously former Panthers quarterback, former NFL MVP, and overall just a pretty big guy, was hosting a event in Atlanta for one of his high school camps. And we don't know the motives behind it, the reason behind it. 3 guys tried to jump him at this event. There's video of this. You can find it on Twitter. The fight lasts about 30 seconds. It's easy to forget how big professional athletes are. Cam Newton himself, by the way, is, for those curious, 6'5" and 245 pounds. How do you think these 3 average Joes did against a professional athlete?
Well, unless they go to Cobra Kai, I'm betting they get their behinds kicked.
You would be correct in that. Now, again, it's a video, and there's a lot of people around. The fight eventually gets broken up by about 30 seconds. If I can't give you any other description, Cam Newton, who wears some of those weird kind of funny hats, his hat didn't even come off during this altercation. I mean, he was handling these 3 guys as good as you can. Now, again, it gets broken up. There are some police officers there, so things didn't escalate too far. But did you ever have those, friends in high school, or the family member, the uncle that said, well, if I hadn't hurt my knee, I would have played in the NFL or the NBA, or that guy back in high school that, looked at the, starting center on the football team, said, I could beat him up if he talked to my girl or something like that. And you just look at him and no, you can't. That's not true at all. You think that, but go over there and do something about it. And they would never do anything. That's exactly what happened here. Whoever these 3 guys were, and we don't know the full details of it, but they're I don't know what they were mad at him about, but hey, the 3 of us, we could take him. The 3 of us banded together, we could take down Cam Newton. I bet we could. And they probably strolled up there with a lot of confidence. And quickly, that confidence faded.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. It's a bad look. Did they have a lot to drink or something?
I would think not, because again, this is like a camp for, where you get to highlight, high school football players throwing and catching and all that kind of stuff. So, those events typically don't involve alcohol. And again, I don't know the exact, the full details on this haven't emerged yet. So I don't know who these guys are, what their vendetta against Cam Newton was. That there was a video of allegedly one of them that was involved with the fight, saying that he threw the ball better than Cam Newton. I don't know where that goes. Again, we're talking about a former NFL MVP here. I don't know who Joe Schmo thinks he is, but I highly doubt you're going to throw the ball better than him.
Yeah, me too. Maybe just he had to have something. I mean, where I'm bigger, I'm the man. I can throw a great ball in the backyard.
Yeah, I don't know, but they'll at least forever have the memory of getting their butts kicked by a professional athlete.
Well, it's a story you can tell.
I guess so. An embarrassing story, because, again, if you can find the video on Twitter, he's handling these guys pretty well. Again, it gets broken up relatively quickly. But, probably for those guys' sake, because if that lasted any longer, it might have gotten really, really ugly.
So it was a 7-on-7 event, and
yes.
So there's 3 guys taking on one guy who's really 7 guys.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. It's like those old school, squash matches in WWE or WCW where you'd get King Kong Bundy against 3 just pipsqueaks in the ring, and he'd just like stack them one on top of the other and pin them or something like that.
Right.
That's essentially what you're getting here.
Andre the Giant. With
Yeah, exactly.
hands bigger than the guy.
It's like, well, hey, there's 3 of them that might have a chance, and just one chop to the head of each one of them, and they all go down. That's essentially what happened here. Like Cam Newton is bigger than most quarterbacks anyway. Like he's the size of a lot of linemen. Like the weight's a little bit lower, but still he's big, and he's muscular. I wouldn't dare try and pick a fight with him.
No.
But well, you know, they hand out that Darwin Award every year, right, for dumbest decision by a human in whatever given year. Early vote goes for these 3 guys for whatever reason they tried to attack Cam Newton. It didn't go too well for them.
No. By the way, I don't like Cam Newton, but still.
That's okay. You don't have to like Cam Newton, but even if you are his biggest hater in the world, I would advise you to try and swing on him, because that's not gonna end too well for you.
Maybe one of them was the guy whose laptop he allegedly took back in the.
You know what? Now we're diving deeper into the story. More details of this, I'm sure, will come out, and maybe that's the case. Who knows? But regardless, handle that one in court, not with the fist, because it didn't go well for those guys. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Wes and Chris will join me here on the game.